Hey, good morning. This is Ken Long from Delro, and I'm pleased to introduce Colonel Keith Floor, who's currently working over at Red Team University, has written our foundational article on groupthink, and he was kind enough to come on over, and we just thought we'd talk about red teaming, critical thinking, and his experiences as a Army officer, a leader of staffs, a teacher at Red Team, and a facilitator of critical thinking. So we appreciate you coming over, sir, and maybe just get us started with anything you want to talk about.
Well, first of all, Ken, thanks for asking me to come over. I certainly enjoy sharing some ideas with folks in the college because I used to work here in my last Army assignment. And for those listening, I've worked in Red Team now since February of 2008, so a little over 7 years. Have spent most of that time teaching, although just a couple of months ago I assumed the deputy director position. In the words of the founding director for Red Teaming and the University of Foreign Military and Cultural Studies, UFMCS, Greg Fontenot, who was one of the SAMS directors about 20 years ago, Greg's utterance to me one day when I was rewriting the theory and reasoning block is that red teaming is critical thinking. This idea that Red Team is some voodoo sect outside of the norm is really wrong. What red teaming is really intended to be is an inject of more specific and focused critical thinking inside of a corps and division staff or a brigade staff, so that that staff can realize through the Red Team's efforts that some of their ideas are based on faulty assumptions, and they're not looking at all the alternatives that they need to look at. So red teaming is really critical thinking. Hence, when we teach red teaming, we are teaching critical thinking writ large.
I remember when Red Team first came out, a lot of folks thought it says, well, this is just going to be like safety, that after you do what you normally do before you ship the product, you go through some quick checklist to say that, we're now going to be safe about this. I've done my checklist, and now I can send it. That's not at all what you're talking about here.
No, and I'm sure that all of you listening can well appreciate that. Were we to red team the MDMP effort after the war game and before the publication of the plan, it's too little, too late. So actually, we teach red teamers that the more ideas they have that are inserted into the staff sooner in the process, the earlier the better, because we have to correct perceptions and ensure that alternatives are explored long before the war game and the results of MDMP are finalized and the decision is made.
Yeah, I guess the worst thing in the world would be to be at the end of the order, remember to red team, and come up with a really good idea. And now what do I do?
Exactly.
I'm going to go back and redo this whole thing, but I got to get it across the LD. So integrated into the plan.
Ideally, red teaming done properly is done at the lowest level, at the peer-to-peer level. It's done early so that those peers can rectify whatever the red team sees early on. And the result is we avoid some catastrophe, which obviously is hard to take credit for from the red team perspective, but the red team is not concerned about that. What it's concerned about is that a better decision is made by the commander in the end, because we saw all of the possibilities from the front end.
So early and often, that's the return on investment. The sooner that you discover the flaw or the overlooked assumption, the less time you waste. The sooner you can turn that into your favor. Yeah. So tell me about that article. What prompted the article?
Well, the Red Team curriculum writ large, as I said, is critical thinking, applied critical thinking, because in addition to the academic portion, we teach a number of techniques and procedures, red team tools and liberating structures, to apply to specific problems to help not only critically but creatively think about problems in different ways. But because the red team is embedded within a brigade, division, corps staff, an ASCC staff, and even at a COCOM level, a red team itself is a group of personalities. And it works in observing and working with a much larger group of personalities. So as we restructured the red team curriculum in about 2011, it occurred to me that one of the things that I had read much about in the preparation for rewriting our critical thinking curriculum is that we constantly run into instances of social psychology. Not only do we use a curriculum that is based on cognitive psychology, but social psychology looks at groups and how groups act. And unfortunately, there are many causes of groupthink that lead groups to do things that are untoward with respect to the final decision. And in the paper you see several causes of groupthink. If you think about what some of those causes are, high stress, high risk, a group that favors the group decision and conformity over individuals sticking up and saying, here's what I really think about this problem. When you think about that, the military is unfortunately predisposed toward being a groupthink machine. And so it occurred to us that if we're going to teach red team individuals how to be a member of a larger red team, we had to tackle the groupthink challenge first and foremost within that team itself. And then once they understood the causes of groupthink and ways to mitigate groupthink, then we needed to orient them toward the staff for which they are working, because that staff probably doesn't know anything about groupthink. Look for evidence of causes that are happening, do the best that they can to mitigate it, such that in the end, the red team's presence in a brigade, division, or corps staff helps mitigate the very item itself.
Well, we've grown up in a military culture that really respects authority. I mean, one of the foundational principles of our leadership doctrine is the idea that the individual leader, tactically and technically proficient,
Right.
And has command presence, and we respect rank, and we want to believe the senior guy knows more than everybody else, and so there's a lot of social pressure and professional pressure in there to kind of bow to authority and to trust the old man. Does that present special challenges, do you think?
I think it really comes down to the personality of the old man, quote unquote. If the commander for whom we work is one who appreciates divergent thought, who wants to know all of the issues and possible alternatives before he or she decides to make a decision, then red teaming stands a chance to succeed. And that will naturally permit a climate within the command that divergent thought on the part of the staff members themselves is an important and inherently vital kind of thing. If the commander is one that, by God, I know it all, well, of course you're going to have a problem with that. But that's just the way it goes. So red teaming thrives in a command climate where the commander wants to know all of the options and all the alternatives, and he wants to know what faulty assumptions all of them may be making as part of their initial assessment before the staff gets too far down the line.
Yeah, as I was reading your article, I was remembering some challenges in the classroom and as a member of a staff where it's the spring butt phenomenon, where you get some guy that wants to talk about his ideas, and it's different than what the group wants, and nobody wants to be there. They're sensitive to time pressure, and they want to get on with the work, and yet there's this guy who's persistently asking these hard questions, maybe not easily answered. There can be a social pressure I could see there, where enough is enough. We've heard enough from you, and it's not command authority, but it's sort of that social group authority that says, all right already, we've heard it, let's go and get on to the Ranger objective. What can we do about that?
Well, there are some techniques that we teach that would ideally either be the provenance of the OPT plans chief, or perhaps the chief of staff or brigade executive officer, that allow for the entire group to think through issues and then to surface issues in an anonymous way, and then further other techniques for the group anonymously to vote on those issues, such that at the end of the process the group has posted up on a wall all of the issues it can think of, and it has anonymously voted to see which of those ideas in that group collective seem to be the most important of all to work on, so that the one extrovert who seems to have an opinion on everything isn't allowed to dominate the conversation.
So dominant personalities, if I recall, you talked about that in the article too, is one of the things that can skew the process or make it get prematurely to a decision. Doesn't always have to be the leader. It could be anybody on the staff that's
Right.
that
And
dominant.
when I think of my service in the infantry, it could be the XO, it could be the 3, it could even be a strong 2. Who knows?
Yeah. And it's persuasive because they have a clear position and it's forcefully argued, and that's as good as any other guess so far. Let's just get on with this in the interest of time and preserve time for the units to develop. Yeah. So I like that idea of the anonymous posting because it allows a structured way to get after all those ideas that are out there, but it really causes the group to look at the merits of the idea, disassociate it with a personality, so maybe we can treat those ideas fairly. And I like the idea of the structured approach, assigning roles to people to be perhaps the devil's advocate. I think you talked about that in the article.
It's also important for individuals to understand that each of them has to put ideas into the conversation, because self-censorship is one of the causes of groupthink, where if I see as an individual the group discussion moving in a certain direction, I may have a great idea, but if I say that I'm just going to censor my idea out, I'm not going to contribute it because the group knows where it wants to go, I'm just as guilty of groupthink as the group that's moving in a particular direction. So I have a responsibility to get my ideas into the conversation too. By doing it anonymously, we remove the threat from anyone being held accountable specifically for an idea that runs afoul of perhaps that dominant personality that doesn't want to hear the idea, or is one of those personalities that is going to try to protect the group from external ideas that run against what he thinks or she thinks needs to be the final solution.
Well, especially early in the process when we really haven't sorted out what the real problem is or what an approach might be, that self-censorship, really we don't know enough yet to decide that idea is not good enough or appropriate for this venue. So we have to guard against that rush to judgment. I think you talked about that in the article too, about avoiding the premature decision, perhaps the commander not offering his personal opinion so he doesn't skew it with what we think he might want, so that we really are free to think broadly. I think that was a key takeaway for me. To shift gears a little bit and go a little bit off script, you mentioned in our warm up that you'd been facilitating the Project Solarium, and I wonder if the things that you teach at Red Team and some of those facilitation techniques have been helpful for you in Solarium. What's the experience with that been like?
Yeah, they absolutely are. We've spent probably a total of 6 days between 2 captains' Solarium events. There is some preparation before the captains arrive so that we all arrive on a certain level, ready to continue the conversation in the classroom here at Lewis and Clark. But we use those anonymity techniques not only to get the best ideas into the conversation, for the group of captains to vote on those ideas as to which of those ideas merit the attention of General Odierno at the outbreak. But we also use some of the techniques to improve the nature of the conversation itself. So once we have voted anonymously on what we think key issues are and what some of the discussion points are, we'll then go back through another cycle and say, what are the recommendations for this key issue, for that key issue, and for the third key issue? And then we vote anonymously on those, so that the results that are briefed to General Odierno from each captain's Solarium group represents an anonymous voting of how those things seem to be most or least important to the group itself.
Yeah, by way of background for those of you listening, I'm not sure when you're listening to this, so Project Solarium was a Chief of Staff of the Army initiative to solicit out-of-the-box thinking or a wide range of perspectives from a broad demographic of captains who were engaged with Army-level challenges that span the entire force and all our lessons learned from the last decade of war, in an effort to ensure that going forward, we're looking at the right issues for the future of the Army. And so this was going outside of the normal product development, combat development's approach to get fresh thinking from multiple perspectives. And so Project Solarium is, in one sense, is an organizational response to a need for critical thinking. In the same way, I view that Red Team University itself was the profession recognizing a need to get outside of its own normal ritual processes to get diverse perspectives. We're getting close to our time here. Just any summary thoughts about the importance of critical thinking or the role of Red Team University, or anything we haven't covered yet before we get on?
I guess, Ken, I would finish up by saying, first of all, for all of you that are listening, in my opinion, the last 7 years of my life after I left the Army have been enormously rewarding in thinking about how do we teach younger officers and NCOs to think critically in a better way. So the research and the assembling of the curriculum that we currently use has, for me, been a personally rewarding experience, and it continues to be so. The second thing I would say is, in so doing, not only for me, but for you as well, increasing your ability to think critically is really a liberating experience, because the more you realize how much previously you may have relied upon values and beliefs buried below the level of your consciousness in motivating your actions, the more you realize that there are other ways to think about and do things, the more liberating your life experience can and should be. I guess the last thing I would say is that, and this is back to the point on a commander's reception of red teaming. Even when we're in a command environment where red teaming is accepted by the commander, he wants to know different alternatives, different perspectives, what poor assumptions the group may be making early on before he comes to a decision. Ultimately, red teaming is designed to help him make a better decision. But at the point where he does make a decision, then the red teamers, like everyone else, salute and take the hill.
Row well and live is one of our favorite sayings here. When it's time to go, you got to go. And sir, we really appreciate your time and interest, and looking forward to continuing to work together on critical thinking for the force. We appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.